Now, to get started, let me introduce you to today's speaker. Scott Provence is the L&D strategist and consultant whose programs serve millions annually. He has worked in both public and private sectors and led teams from small startups all the way to Google. Scott began his L&D career as a college instructor at the University of Washington, where he received two master's degrees and was a Nelson Bentley Fellow. So please give a warm welcome to Scott.
Hi, thanks so much, Liz. You can hear me okay?
Yes,
Thumbs
you're
up.
good to go.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to be here. I'm really excited to talk with everyone. I'm watching the chats coming in. Looks like we got folks from all over the place, which is wonderful. And yeah, I'm really excited to dive in. Nice to meet everyone. Like Liz said, I'm Scott Provence. I am VP of Integrated Learning Services here at ELB Learning, and I'm excited to talk about this topic specifically because I think it has woven itself through a lot of my career. I've been an external L&D consultant for some of the companies like Liz mentioned, Google, Mayo Clinic, some of these different industries all over the place. I've also worked in-house leading L&D teams. And I think in both internal and external settings, I've found the importance of weaving in strategy and doing some of these initial early steps, which can be frustrating in a sense, especially when you've got a C-suite chomping at the bit to say, can we launch this course? How do we slow that down and say, let's make sure we're going in the right direction? And yet so essential to the later steps to come. So excited to hear others describe their own successes and frustrations with working with those steps. And then my main goal here is obviously to share with you some of the best practices that I've employed and dial them all the way down to very tangible things that you can take back to your teams today. I will, my quick caveat today is I've built this hour session to be super interactive and hands-on in the sense that I'm going to be throwing things over the fence to you as a group, as individuals to actually start working on. So I'm going to pose some questions to you and give you some frameworks, but it probably would be helpful for you to fire up that part of your brain and drink that extra cup of coffee and maybe even have out scratched note paper or a screen open where you can type out some of the challenges that you're working on or a project maybe that you're working on today. So wanted to plant that seed that if you're interested and you've got something that you want to kind of noodle over for yourself, I'm not going to call you up on screen necessarily, but it might be helpful for you to be building on that or working on that as we go through these slides. All right, sounds good. I think looks like we got a good group of folks here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can jump into this. And just confirming here, looks like you're able to see my screen now, Liz.
Looks great.
Awesome, perfect. Well, so again, diving right in, I think one of the things that I'm actually really excited to do right at the start here is pull up a quote that I often will use. I can't remember the first time I ran across this quote. The thing that I do remember is I almost immediately forgot a couple of the key elements of it. So I'm going to pull up this quote here, and this is from Eisenhower. And no fair going to Google now and looking up the answers here, but when I first heard of this quote, I thought, oh, that was really interesting. And then about a week later, I had forgotten which of these words came in which order. And I thought that was kind of telling for myself, where I was saying, okay, in preparing for battle, I've always found that one of these things is useless, but the other one is indispensable. And I kept catching myself going, was it plans that were useless? Was it planning that was useless? I can't. And I'd have to go up and I'd relook the quote, and then a week later I'd forget it again. And so I thought that was, maybe just a sign of my own memory, but an interesting thing to spend a little bit of time with. And so hopefully if a few of those of you who don't know this quote or can't memorize it, I'd like to pose this to you just as a point blank question here. If you had to guess which of these two things would be the indispensable part of Eisenhower's quote, is it planning that's indispensable, or is it a plan that's indispensable? So Liz, I think we've got a quiz here. So if you want to fire that up for the folks here, I'd love to have people just cast a guess.
Yeah, I've already launched it, so I'll give people 5 more seconds and then I'll shoot the results your way.
I'm really eager, and this is going to be the moment of truth because I'm either going to find out like everyone knows this quote, Scott, and no one got it confused. It's just you, or no, this is interesting, and we've got kind of a split group here.
Yeah, there's definitely plot twists for sure. There you go.
Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Wow. So we've got 55% say planning is indispensable, 45% say a plan is indispensable. So I feel a little more validated for myself that I was going back and forth on these. Um, and if it, I want to leave the chat kind of going through kind of ongoing discussion here. So if people want to argue their case on the chat boards there, you've got certainly got a lot of support on either side, right? Yeah, good chats coming in here. If you can have a plan but no understanding action toward it, planning therefore is essential. Love it. I could argue the other side that yeah, planning is just talking. Planning is why I have 7 hours of meetings every day, and we need just something concrete and a plan. So you have to spend lots of time planning if you don't have a strategy. You keep spinning your wheels. You can amend a plan, but the essence of planning is essential. This is great. No battle plan survives first contact, right? Another great quote. So I've got this plan, and then I implement the action. 30 seconds later, I'm like, oh man, I gotta turn around and do this. Good conversations already going in the slots here. This is, I mean, I can already tell in my role right now, this is a lot of what I do with when I come in and work with clients is, drop this thought truth bomb in here, and then I go, okay, like let's hash this out and figure out, even if you were doing just this activity with your team or your board, you can already start to maybe pull out some threads of, oh, interesting, this might be why we struggle with step X, Y, and Z, or struggle with launching product X, Y, Z. I can't even read all of these chat messages here, but these are really good. These are really good nuggets here. All right, we're ready for the reveal. So according to Eisenhower, and again, we could, knew a thing or two, but yeah, we could make arguments maybe for different things. But I adjusted. This is actually the real grammar of the quote, so I didn't want to do this earlier to give it away. But Eisenhower officially said, in preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And again, take it or leave it from the Eisenhower side of things. But it was interesting. And again, I found myself going back and forth. I think probably having the same argument that we're having, or not argument, the same discussion that we were having in the chat thread in my own head on a weekly basis, when I would forget this quote and go, well, what was it? And what am I feeling right now? Why am I frustrated this week with planning? Like, is it specifically that planning doesn't work, or is it specifically that we're not planning with the right steps in place? Why am I frustrated this other week when I've got my 17 bullet point plan that immediately got thrown out? And I think if we just followed it, it really would solve some of these things. So something that we can kind of use in our own minds to figure out where the tension points are for ourselves, for our teams, for our organization. As I started to document more of my own thoughts, I got a little clearer in my own head about what some of the differences were for myself. And I can just happy to say that I now mostly remember Eisenhower's quote in the right order. And some of the notes that I use for this, I think is a lot of what everyone's been saying in the chat here as well, is that a plan, which can be great, also has some drawbacks. Plans can be static. So I have to remember everyone's got my version 3.2 of this plan, right? Let's make sure that we have the right document or the right slide deck open. It can be hard to change sometimes, especially if we've got to go through approvals and iterations. Plans can be really helpful, but typically they are most helpful in simple environments. If we think about cooking, I'm not a good cook at all. Since we're just talking about cooking and baking, I am not a good cook at all. I follow plans in the kitchen because I need to remember, how to make, pancakes, and I need to have those 5 steps to track. Plans can be really great for simple environments. When the environment gets a lot more complex, plans can start to break down. The other thing that's really interesting to think about is a plan is really focused on a thing. I cling to my version 3.2 slide deck because it feels concrete. Again, some benefits if I'm operating in a world that has no concrete things around it. The challenge with that is it's focused on the thing rather than the people and the situation and everything else. And then obviously on the other side, we have a lot of the opposites. We have planning is continuous and iterative, and it is specifically not meant to be static and concrete. I like plans, even though I can be frustrated with all of the meetings that I attend. I like plans because they're focused on people and they focused on the conversations. And almost by definition, they're it shows us why planning is better for these complex environments. If everything around us, including our timelines and the directives from our board and the demands of the customer and the advances of technology are changing on a weekly basis, planning can be really helpful for those complex environments. As you have other thoughts or other bullet points that you would add on this list, please do drop them in. I'm glad to see. Thank you for those in the chat giving me giving me some support that this is something that goes back and forth for others too, and excited to kind of see what other bullets folks bring out. So we're gonna kind of dive in now to the meat of our talk today, and I promise you right at the start here, 3 steps that we can take to better prepare ourselves and our learning and development teams and customers for success. What are the 3 steps that we can take before we get into the actual, here's the course, or here's the software, here's the design process. And the reason, some of you might be thinking at this point, planning, whatever, sure, why do I care? The one thing that I really do want to focus on when we think about why does this matter, why is Scott spending so much time talking about this somewhat arbitrary distinction between these 2 words, is I really go back to that idea of plans focused on a thing versus planning focused on a process or a group of people. And I keep going back to that idea of that better mousetrap. And this obviously comes when I put on my consultant hat and I'm working with clients. They're often coming saying like, hey, can you do AI, or can you do this, like this next new tool? Like I want this new thing. And I keep having in my mind that idea of that chasing that better mousetrap. And is it that we want a better mousetrap, or is it that we want fewer mice? And that difference in what is the ultimate goal we want to move ourselves toward can really reframe the whole environment and our idea around what a tool might be able to solve. More quotes here. That, again, just because we can invent a better mousetrap doesn't mean that anyone needs a better mousetrap. And what do we want to, how do we kind of take that step back and say, how do we define the customer problem first? I think it was Einstein. I know I'm, just throwing quotes left and right at you here. But Einstein said something along the lines of, if I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and then 1 minute solving it. So again, that idea that spending as much time as is needed and fighting for that extra time to define the problem, even though people want to skip over that and jump into the solution. I want the mousetrap itself. I don't want to think about the mice on the floor. That can be a really, really important thing to do. There's a great comment here from Amy. So it's such a challenge sometimes with clients to drill down to the actual problem after they see, especially with this world of AI and the tools, right? Well, like, yeah, just give me the tool. Okay, well, what is it that you want to solve? So that's really what we're going to do next. We're going to talk about these 3 steps. And obviously the first one here is, let's define the problem. And so I'll give you some frameworks that you can use. And again, this is priming you to say, if you've got a project or a challenge that you're working on, pull out some scratch paper, because we're actually going to try to do this in miniature here. We're going to define some of the problems that we're working within here. Second, after we define the problem, we don't just jump to design yet. I'm going to show you some steps that we do to ask questions about the problem, and again, some specific things that we might be able to probe out there. And then this is the one that I typically see either skipped over or not done maybe because people aren't aware of it. But I would really encourage this one as well. How do we chart the risks? And again, for each of these, I'll give you some frameworks that you can use. These are the steps that I work through with clients and in my own consulting and my little drop-in informal meetings. But if we can move through these things, either with thought leaderships and partnerships outside, or just with your own team, you're going to be in a much better space to deliver a solution that works. All right, looking through the slide, the chat here, looks like we've got nothing specific in terms of question, which is great. So if everyone's ready, we're going to now dive into the first of these 3 steps. And again, I'm gonna turn this over to you a bit more. So have your fingers ready to respond in the chat, have your notepads ready when we talk about defining the problem, this first step. So I'm gonna open it up to you. For those of you that have worked with problem statements before, or have done some work with your team in actually defining defining the problems before you dive in, what are some of the elements that you incorporate in a problem statement, a statement of what you're trying to solve? And I'll give you 30 seconds or a minute to think about it or answer in the chat for those of you that do it. Audience from Linda, awesome. Ooh, 5 levels of why, Scott, that's great. We're actually, yeah, we're gonna come back to both of those. Having a focus on the context, yep, excellent. Ooh, communications, yeah, really good one. And hopefully some of these frameworks that we're going through today can be used as conversation starters, communication tools. Focus on the context, the sector, yep, the people, absolutely. Time constraints, oh yeah, and another great one from Linda, not just time constraints, but constraints in general, like what's holding us down? Oftentimes it's time, or that classic time, money, quality. Oh, I love this from here, from Ollie, asking the question, how could you help me to blank, blank, blank? Stakeholder interest versus employee needs. Yeah, that's a great one. We're going to come back to that in a second here too. So here's the ones that I typically use, and I think everyone in the chat here, and thank you for all of the participation. I think you hit on a lot of these, right? For my problem statements that I typically do, I want to know who's the audience. So again, several people mentioned this: the people, the audience who need to get involved, the conversation, stakeholders versus employees. Who's the audience or audiences that we're working with? What is the goal or the solution we want to reach? I love this comment here from Bill too, like lead with a positive intent, maybe. So not it's this idea of a problem statement being like, oh no, something's on fire or something's terrible. How do we kind of frame this in a positive way? Focusing on a goal or solution can be really helpful. Like what is it that you want? If you had a magic wand and you could wave this around, what would be the thing that we're striving for? That's a really positive thing. So even though I'm calling this problem statement, boo, bummer, goals or solutions are really key for this. And then finally, just like Lyndon mentioned in the chat there, what are the constraints? What are the obstacles getting in our way? Actually, a lot of my background before I moved into instructional design and college teaching was humanities and creative writing, and we always would frame our characters in terms of goal, motivation, conflict, which is a lot of the same thing. What does my character want? Why is it important? And then what's getting in their way there? So if you can identify these core elements and do this in a way that's really easy to communicate, this can unlock all sorts of new insights. I'll give you a really quick example of this, and then I'm going to throw this over to you to start thinking about your own problem statement for one of the projects you're working on. So as you start to chew that over, let me give you one from my real life experiences. Someone will call me up. Again, ELB Learning does everything end to end, from consulting all the way to tangible off-the-shelf solutions. So they call me up and they say, "Hey, Scott, do you have a leadership development training? You have something that I can just pull off the shelf and plug into my system." My response would probably be something along the lines of, "Sure, we've got some really great things. Before I jump into that solution step, can we talk a little bit about the problem that you're having?" And even just framing this problem statement for that type of request can lead to very different routes. So listen to these 3 problem statements and see if you can recognize how different the end goal might be. Scott, do you have a leadership development training? Problem statement 1, our C-suite wants a ready to launch leadership 101 learning, but we don't have one. So who's the audience? Our C-suite. They want to launch something like yesterday related to leadership 101. They realize there's a gap in our offerings and we don't have anything. So can you give me something to plug in? Okay, that's kind of what maybe the problem statement that led to the call. Different way to frame this problem statement. Scott, I'm calling really because our recruiting team wants to fill more leadership roles internally, but no one seems qualified. So who's the audience? It's actually our kind of recruiting outreach team. They are doing a lot of external hires, and that's costing them a lot of money, and they want to fill these roles internally. But every time they look at our current bench, they just feel like they don't have the CVs, the resumes, the skill set. Okay, very different problem statement. Also equally important, maybe even more important than we just need another e-learning. Third way to reframe this problem statement: our mid-level managers want paths to promotion, but there really don't seem to be any in our current setup, and so they're leaving. So who's the audience? This is maybe our end user audience, the goals that they want, and then the obstacles that are getting in the way. Totally different path. 3 different routes for us to go down here. Anyone have similar challenges with that? Similar realizations when they start to probe on their problem statements. Hopefully just even in that little mini example, you can see how pausing before I just go, oh yeah, leadership 101, drop it in the cart, here you go, can really help us identify better paths forward. And yeah, it's great from Mylan here. L&D order takers, right? Like we're so used to that, like, oh, what do you want? Yeah, give me 3 leadership 101 trainings and a side of fries, and then we'll just drop it in the cart, and then off you go. This is exactly what we need to do to kind of move ourselves from that concept of an order taker to, yeah, before I just kind of scratch that immediate itch, or check in whatever thing that C-suite said they wanted. Let's kind of pause for a second here. Ask is really what they're actually looking for. Yep, absolutely. Or yeah, from Ollie, reframing the question from what can we do to what to who can help me come to a solution. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is really great. I love this conversation going on. Here's going to be your first kind of interactive assignment here. So get your scratch note paper, your screens ready. I want you to see if you can frame some project that you're working on right now in a 1-sentence problem statement. And again, feel free, sanitize it, scrub it. It doesn't have to be anything really super company specific. But this is the framework that I like to use because it's just super easy. And if anyone else like me has played Mad Libs when you were a kid, really fun, right? Okay, just fill in the blanks. So here's the basic framework that I use. Blank audience, wants or needs or is trying to get whatever, blank goal, but blank obstacle is getting in the way. And you can obviously, add some extra words or kind of frame that around to make a more coherent sentence. But if you listen to my examples, it kind of follows the same format. Our C-suite wants a ready to launch Leadership 101 e-learning, but we don't have one in our company right now. Our recruiting team wants to fill more leadership roles internally versus externally, but no one on our current employee list seems qualified for the open roles. Our mid-level managers want paths to promotion, but there don't seem to be any available to them, and maybe a secondary obstacle. As a result, they're leaving. All framed kind of in this format. So I'm now going to turn this over to you and take a minute or two to chew this over. Again, this is something you could probably spend hours developing, so don't feel like you need to make it perfect, but yeah, take a minute or two, draft it out, and then let's drop some of these into the chat so people can kind of see where these are going. And I will do the same for mine for the 3 examples that I had, but take a couple minutes here. For those of you that have already entered one, you should look through this chat because this is a goldmine of ideal problem statement examples. These are really cool. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, save this chat. No kidding. I love this last one from Claudia here. This is like the textbook solution, right? Or the textbook problem, I should say. Sales rep, some representative group needs to improve skills. So which kind of leads us to think maybe a training would help improve skills, but they don't have time to spend in a training. So I need to get you into a workshop and off the floor. But anytime you spend off the floor, it's kind of compounding the problem. We're in this negative feedback loop. Really, really great. Okay, last 30 seconds for anyone else to drop in even just rough drafts. These are excellent. Yeah, time. Yeah, time is a major constraint. Agreed from Amy. One of the other constraints that I often encourage, and I didn't even. These are great chats. I didn't even mention this, and it didn't seem to have slowed any of you down. But I will, even when I do consulting or coaching with folks, say it's okay if your obstacle is I don't know. That's also fine. That represents its own type of obstacle, right? So my audience needs to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't know how to solve that. Like, I don't know why they're not able to do this. Rather than trying to fill that gap with, and training is the solution. Yeah, maybe I don't know. So it's okay for me to use that as an obstacle, because that points us to a whole new set of things to explore. All right, very cool. Well, keep them coming in. Again, this is, as you can probably guess, this is something I can spend hours working with leadership groups or training groups on. So to think that we're just gonna spend only a couple minutes and then immediately have something that will take end to end, probably a little optimistic. But hopefully, just even in these couple minutes, you can see how much reframing this can cause. So this is just step one. We're going to do a lot more, even more reframing of these problem statements as we get into the next couple of levels there. Um, so any other questions, kind of as you're reflecting back on the step one process? We're going to move into 2 and 3, but I also want to make sure that we're pausing. We've got our brains and our fingers firing now. If there are any questions that come up for anyone, and if so, drop them into the chat, and we've got a great group of folks interacting here that might be able to help answer. But think about any issues that might come up with this. Sometimes I hear questions like, how do I get my stakeholders involved in this process, or how do I do all of these different things? And oh yeah, and yeah, in the chat here, this someone just dropped in my email. Yeah, please do. If it's like, hey, I've got a question, but it's like it's a long one. Yeah, reach out to me. Certainly happy to. As you can probably guess, it's my nerdy side. I will talk about this stuff for hours. So yeah, other questions that come up that are easy to answer, drop them in the chat. One of the things that sometimes comes up is, well, you're missing one part of your problem statement, Scott. You're missing the solution. So like my audience wants this, but this is getting in the way, and so therefore we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Anyone guess why we don't include the solution in a problem statement? Yeah, because it's from the audience itself. Yeah, more braining, more thinking on this. Yeah, more brain. Yeah. So because this is coming from our group and is a collaborative process, yeah, we want to pause on that. Yeah, and the emphasis here from Rachel, there could be other solutions out there. This is Eisenhower's quote in a nutshell, right? If my step one statement was, here's the audience, here's what they want, here's what's getting in the way, here's what we're going to do about it, that kind of represents a plan. I would put that in a 20 slide deck and include some fancy infographics, and that becomes your plan. And as we've seen, that can lead to some real intense difficulties down the road. So adding a solution to this turns it more into a plan, versus this is a clear statement that invites a lot more conversation. Yeah, so from Claudia, yeah, so solutions need to be percolated. Yeah, sometimes the obstacle is placed by the stakeholders and not reflective of what the audience actually feels. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, this is excellent. This is great. I love these chats here. So yeah, I think you're all picking up on this, that even though as soon as you see this problem statement, you're in this industry because you're a problem solver. So you see the problem and you're like, oh, I know what we can do. So X, Y, and Z. We're going to do this solution here. But yeah, as everyone's showing here, hold on. This is great. Not enough information has been gathered yet to what Taylor just said. Absolutely. So that's kind of, anyway, that's my long-winded answer of saying that's why we don't include solutions at this spot. It's specifically by design. All right, so that was step one. Even if you just take away this Mad Lib statement, this can go a long way in moving us into the right direction of a solution. Let's go on to step two here. So similar to what I think it was Taylor had mentioned in the chat, what we have now is sometimes just even a single statement. That's great. We've started to identify some things. Now what we want to do with that statement is start to poke as many holes in it as we can. And the way, not poke holes to destroy it, but basically use that problem statement as maybe a better metaphor as a problem statement's a seed. We want to grow a tree of questions rather than some sort of destructive hole poking thing. I want to take that problem statement and I want to go around to all of the relevant groups, my stakeholders, my end users, my support staffs, my subject matter experts, and I want to see how long of a question list can I build for this? And you're probably, a lot of people are jumping ahead to kind of realizing like, oh, this is like, yeah, this is change management. This is like all of these things. This is exactly right. This becomes a crux of a conversation tool that really can spark conversation across your organization. But if I have a problem statement, and I'll scroll back up to some of these great problem statements here and see if we can start asking questions. L&D wants, I grabbed one from Bill right now. L&D wants AI voiceover capability, but the company's not made any statements or positive positions on AI yet. So what questions does this spark for us? What are some of the possible questions or positions we'd want to have for AI? What would an AI voiceover capability accomplish for us? How fast do you think we could launch something like that? Who are the stakeholders that we need to get involved in this? What experts in the field are driving our thinking on this? So the scope of these questions can be anything and everything. And these are some of the ones, again, you can tell that the ones that I have on the screen here, they're not specific to a topic. We could get a whole list of those by themselves. But I like asking these types of questions. This is one of my favorites. What's the worst thing that could happen? Okay, so we have this problem. Let's say we don't do anything about it. What's the worst thing that could happen? Ask it a little bit facetiously, but that helps be a forcing function to, oh yeah, if we didn't have an extra e-learning by tomorrow, what's the worst thing that could happen? Really, not that much. Okay, well, I'm not saying that we can't get another e-learning in our product suite here, but are there other more pressing issues like our frontline managers are leaving in droves? That's probably a bigger challenge right now. So what's the worst that can happen? How long has this been an issue? Is this just like the latest issue du jour, or has this been going on for 6 months? Who else is aware of this problem? Where are we disagreeing? If someone else is coming and saying this is not an issue. And I think way back at the start of the conversation, I think Scott had mentioned the 5 whys. Absolutely spot on here. For those that don't know that 5 why process. So I want to, if someone says something to me, I want to ask why, and then they're going to respond, and then I want to ask why to that response, and then they gave me another response. I'm going to ask why to that. And the idea of asking why 5 times, 7 times is it inherently tries to drill down into that core issue. Why do we want AI capabilities? Well, because AI is the wave of the future. Well, why is AI the wave of the future? Well, because it's redefining how our workers are going to be interacting with customers. Well, why is it redefining that? Because everyone wants solutions faster. Well, why do they want solutions faster? Okay, because, and we're starting to now dig into some root causes that maybe are driving our initial responses. 5 whys, yep. 6 Sigma, yep. These are all great. So I haven't kept track of all of the comments and questions. Liz, did I miss anything major? I saw some people mentioning, oh yeah, reach out to Scott. Yeah, please do. But if there are any questions that we can pause and answer here, anything that I'm missing, Liz?
Yeah, there's some, I wouldn't say off topic, but more so just wanting your expertise and thoughts on certain topics like AI and all that. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on those, but let me dive even deeper.
Very cool.
And Scott,
yeah.
I'll just add in, there's a lot of comments about struggles with time and bandwidth, if you have any suggestions.
Yeah. Time, bandwidth, always the challenge, right? We've all got, that's like that constant limitation. Trying to think of the most succinct way to frame this. reach out to me. So everyone's got my email. I can try to track down some good case studies for this, but without pulling one just completely off the top of my head, I will say that consistently those that go through these early steps get to their results, their ultimate results faster. The maybe frustrating paradox of what this is often you will hear from your stakeholders, I don't have time for this step, Scott, hey, Carl just reached out to Scott to get an e-learning off the shelf. And now Scott came back to Carl. Now Carl's having to go to the leadership saying, Scott wants to do with this whole environmental analysis and take, 2 weeks to scope out and sketch out our ideas. And leadership says, we don't have time for that. So time becomes a seeming constraint or a seeming bandwidth. My argument, and again, this is where we get to that paradox, is when time feels like that kind of a pressure point, you can't afford not to do this type of stuff. So even though it does seem like it takes longer, this is when anytime that pressure comes up, that's just a flag for me that this is even more essential to slow down and do. When I was in a little more industry specific L&D consulting, I was doing a lot of work with healthcare and behavioral counseling, and there is very motivational, interviewing driven process where people, rather than just trying to get someone in and fix them, spend time with the client to figure out what are the real core needs and what's driving you. And if you had to identify some of your abilities, what would they be? And the response from counselors when they're told, well, you're not seeing clients fast enough, is this is the most effective, efficient way to get the end results we want, even though it looks like I'm stretching out this conversation. I'm skipping over so many extra steps and re-diagnoses and re-prescribing and all of these things that are going to happen. So from Carl, any thoughts about the critical path or approach to problem solving? Honestly, I would say the more folks we can get to just do these couple of steps, that really does underlie a lot of the core concepts of problem solving. Going back to our idea here I'll skip back a couple of slides. Define the problem, ask questions, and chart risks. You could redefine these to really be the first few steps of the scientific method. So, I'm going to make observations, I'm going to hypothesize, and I'm going to design some experiments and kind of prioritize which one I want to do first. Problem solving 101, decision making 101. So yeah, I would say, again, not that this needs to be the only framework you use, but if we can, the more you are able to take your teams through these 3 steps or steps like them, that really does build up problem solving competencies and muscles. Really good questions. Okay, so if we don't have, okay, so Bill, this is all awesome. I'm excited to see what Scott has to say about step 3. Yeah, so we've got a problem statement or a draft of it, and again, we're talking real world here. A lot of you defined a real, what I'm guessing is probably a real life problem statement. Take a couple of minutes, take a minute, just because I don't want to plow ahead too fast, but think for a quiet 30 seconds to 60 seconds on what are the questions that my problem statement is now spurring for me. Again, maybe you're more than welcome to steal any of mine. The 5 whys, not even mine. Take that and add it to your list too. But for the next, just as we wrap up step 2, let's think about what are some of the questions that my problem statement is driving, and put yourself in different roles on your teams and say, well, what would this person ask? What would my leadership group ask? What would my end user ask? All of those things. All right, 30 seconds of that. I love this message here from Claudia. Whose problem is this? I've never asked it that way, but I love that idea. Well, whose problem is this? Is this my problem? Is this leadership's problem? Is this really the end user's problem? Do they not care about this at all? Yeah, is this really a problem at all? Like, how big is that? Yeah, back to what's the worst that could happen? These are great. Okay. Perfect. So again, we spent just a handful of minutes on that step. You could spend days. But now hopefully we've got step one, we defined the problem, we got some drafts of that. We've got step two, we asked a bunch of questions. And we would continue to, if I was doing this in a more concrete, official way, I would be taking this around to everyone I could get my hands on and say, well, what questions would you add to this? The goal here, I just want the longest list possible. Again, there's no such thing as a bad question at this point. So to Bill's point, okay, well, these I'm tracking you so far, Scott. What the heck is this step 3 thing? Let's move on now. So we're going to chart risk, and we're actually going to chart two things, or I'm going to break down this step into two different axes here. We're going to chart risk and uncertainty. So again, it's the point of our first two steps is not to get to specifically holding off the solution. So in a problem statement, we didn't add a solution. And with our list of questions, it wasn't important for us to be able to answer the question. And again, it's hard for our brains to kind of push pause on that. Oh, I see this question and I want to say, yeah, whose problem is it? It's yours, Scott's. Like, next question. Don't answer it just yet. The point of generating those questions now is we want to take that list and then figure out how risky and how uncertain are we about each of these questions. So not knowing the answer to some or all of my list of questions is fine. It's to be expected at this point. I should be aware of what that lack of knowledge or that lack of an answer might cost me, though. So, and when we think about cost, I want you to think about these two terms. Not knowing how to answer this question is going to cost me something in terms of risk, and it's going to cost, I'm going to measure that cost in terms of uncertainty. Risk and uncertainty, yeah. So yeah, exactly. And from Carl's point, no blame here. This is not like, well, you don't know this is your fault, or the answer to this problem is because you didn't do your job. But we just want to think about those costs in terms of how risky is it and how uncertain is it. And then we know the distinction. This is back to our, we're going to rechannel our anxieties from the Eisenhower quote. And we know the difference between risk and uncertainty, because I will say when I first, started learning about this, these would again be things that I'd be like, oh yeah, it kind of means the same thing, right? Risk, uncertainty, whatever. Oh, this is, I've never heard it defined this way from Ollie. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Ollie. Risk is fear, and uncertainty, there's doubt. That's beautiful. I love that. And then I'd want to know, okay, how do you define fear and how do you know doubt? But that's a great way to sum that up. Anyone else have definitions for what risk is versus what uncertainty is? Uncertainty is not necessary. Yeah, very cool. Risk is known, uncertainty isn't. Yeah. Now we're kind of like centering in a bit on like, okay, well, risk is something that I know. Uncertainty is something where I'm like, oh, maybe. Risk is exposure to something bad. Uncertainty and uncertainty could be good or bad. Risk indicates that there's an action that's taken place, and uncertainty is like, yeah, analytical. I still need to kind of stand back and look. Yeah, we're starting to, as a group, I think, kind of circle around this core definition. Yeah, these are all really great. The way that I eventually kind of, clearly defined it or took a crack at it in my own head is risk is, I know what the outcomes, the possible outcomes, I should say, are. I know the distribution of like what could be. And then uncertainty is, I don't. And some of the people were saying this in their quotes, right? Like good, bad, 3 answers, 17 answers. This will take me 3 months, 3 years. I have no idea. So my parameters are totally unscoped from an uncertainty side versus risk being, yep, it's going to be one of these 3 things. I don't know which one, but I know that it's going to be 3. So risk, I know the distribution, the possible outcomes. Uncertainty, I don't. Oh, cool. Some cool links here. There's a great group here. Great chat. Okay, so what are we going to do now? We got our problem statement, we got our list of questions, and now I'm throwing up this. We're advancing in terms of our complexity, and we're throwing up this idea of like, now I got to figure out what to do with this risk and uncertainty chart. What we're going to do is we're going to take our list of questions, and we're now going to assign a level of risk and a level of uncertainty to each question. And again, I'm summarizing what typically will take, a week, 2 weeks to do with a team. So I know you're getting the broad brush strokes, but hopefully you're starting to see some of these connect. I defined a problem. I have a list of questions now that this problem generated. Now I got to figure out how risky and how uncertain am I about each of these questions. I'm going to give you one more little exercise because, again, risk and uncertainty can be hard to define. So I decided to define it through a story problem. So again, we're gonna get some interactions on the chat here to see if we can answer this. But a story problem to help us identify and warm up our brains for determining how risky or how uncertain something is. So imagine this for yourself. Here's our story problem. You're walking into an empty part of your hometown. So town you know really well. You walk into a part that's known to be kind of empty and deserted. Someone pulls you into an alley and they say, hey, guess what, Scott, it's your lucky day. I'm going to take this dice, and they show you this dice, and I'm going to roll it just once. And if the dice comes up 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, I will give you $100. But if the dice comes up 6, you owe me $100. So that's the situation that we all find ourselves in here. Let's see if we can, there's an element from this story problem that touches each of these four quadrants here of risk and uncertainty in a matrix. So what would be low risk in this story problem situation? Risk of, yeah, something could be low risk of like my choice, my agency in the matter. Certainly, yeah, walk away, run away. Risk is do nothing. Yeah. Assuming the best of intentions, there's another thing that could be low risk here. And again, think about risk in terms of distribution. Yeah, there we go. So the odds are in our favor. Just at surface level, I could chart the risk of, hey, a dice has 6 sides, and probabilistically, getting a chance of a 5 out of 6 to win $100. That's low risk. I know the distribution, and the distribution is in my favor. Cool. So what would be high risk? This is a really hard one. So what is something where I know the distribution and the odds are not in my favor? And people are jumping ahead to this kind of what we're going to get into uncertainty. Well, what if the dice is weighted? Like I wouldn't trust this guy. I would run away as fast as I could. Yeah, these are good guesses here. You don't have $100. You don't have the money. I would actually say that that's probably more about a known thing. So I know whether or not I've got $100 in my pocket, right? So that's a very clear known or unknown. But what would be high risk? The only thing that I could kind of think about as a high risk situation is this idea that I'm walking in an empty part of my hometown. So let's say that I know my hometown really well. I know the distribution. High risk would potentially be I'm in an empty part. I know that there's not going to be someone coming by anytime soon. So if this goes south, I know that I won't have necessarily anyone coming by to help. Okay, we talked about what's known a bit. I know how much money I have to lose. And then, as you can probably tell by looking through the chat here, we got a lot of unknowns. We have a lot of high uncertainties. Like, why would someone offer such a unfair deal? This guy must be up to something. I bet this dice is loaded. So that's certainly an unknown that we have. And the importance is we kind of start to chart out, again, as soon as you read that story problem, your mind was immediately starting to prioritize, nope, I've already made my decision. This is, there's enough unknowns here, and I'm charting those with high unknown, high risk. I'm getting out of here. Yeah, I would want to see that $100 bill first. Getting back to the scientific method now, your brain would probably also jump to that first stage of, well, I've diagnosed it, I've made some observations, I have some hypotheses that this guy is up to something. I would want to see some tests, like pull out the money. Can I validate that there's money on the table here? My biggest test, let me roll that dice. Can I do 10 practice rolls and just see what's going to come out here? That's again, when I think about problem solving and scientific method, one of the first tests I would run. Give me the dice. Let me roll this. And I'd be telling myself, if it comes up 6, the first 4 times, that's when I'm going to make my conclusion. That's when I get to the end of my first scientific hypothesis. So again, I know that we're getting a little bit more vague and out there, but really important to pause and identify the differences in assessing risk, assessing certainty, because now what we're going to do with this third step is we're going to take our questions from that problem statement list, and we are now going to track them. And this is something I would do with my team, with my stakeholder team, and try to get alignment on how risky and how uncertain is each of these questions in terms of whether or not we can answer it, and whether in terms of whether or not we are satisfied with the answer, all of those things. All these chats going on. And again, this might seem like an easy step. I would say this is a really, really hard step to do. However, doing this step, one of the most important things that you can do as you move your team incrementally toward an actual learning and development design solution plan. So as another example chart here, someone would come to me and say, Scott, we need IT training. Our IT team wants to reduce the number of tickets by 20%, but they say our software doesn't triage very well. I need training on the triage. Okay, well, great problem statement. Let's get a bunch of questions now, and let's kind of assess, how risky or how de-risked some of these questions or answers are. One of the questions might be, do you have confidence in your software ticketing system? And based on talking with our team, with our leadership, we might say, yeah, I've got confidence in the ticket software. And you know what? If we all of a sudden had to switch, we've got a great change management team and great implementation services. I'm going to count that as super known, and that we've got confidence, we have a ticketing software, and super low risk. I would guess maybe that your IT team would have a different say about that. That's why we want to get people in the room and have this charting process be a collaborative effort. Another question that might come up, is there a rule for what counts as tier 2? Oh, no. Maybe we should define that. Yeah, maybe. And before you start to answer that and jump to definitions, let's just chart that as a high risk uncertainty. We don't know, or we're not all on the same page with what counts as tier 2 right now today. And if we moved ahead with this plan without answering that question, yeah, that would be pretty risky in the sense that we could go down really far down a path and not necessarily get to any solution here. So again, this step, very hard to do, but hopefully by doing step 1, defining the problem, step 2, listing questions, and step 3 now starting to chart those questions, this is now what starts to really set us up for success when we get into our course design and software development and solutioning. So yeah, people are now chomping at the bit. Okay, now can we move to training solutions? Like that's what my team and my stakeholders wanted me to do right from when I first picked up the phone, Scott. So answer is maybe. Ideally, what we want to do at this stage, after we've worked with our teams, and again, this is what I do day in and day out with teams, is let's take those high risk questions and figure out what is the minimum viable step or solution or product we could build to start to de-risk some of those. Can I take some of these and move them from uncertainty and unknown into certain and unknown situations? Yeah, actually training can be really great for that. And maybe we don't even need a long training. Maybe we just need a job aid, or maybe we need a definition of what a tier 2 support ticket means. Moving something from high risk to low risk, that usually involves a lot more collaboration and conversation with stakeholders, leadership, customers to determine how high we want our appetites for risk and uncertainty to be. But deciding which directions we want to move can really help us in figuring out what those solutions are. And then finally, I think the last thing for us to remember is that, again, even after these 3 steps, this is not to say we've got this set plan now. This is not plans, this is planning. This is recognizing that every time we find something in a high risk, high uncertainty situation, we actually need to think about moving this into other parts because of a new wrinkle that came up, a new problem that came up, and how we need to kind of constantly be ready to monitor and change our environment here. I know we're coming up close to time, and I did want to spend a little bit of time, give you time to have questions. So yeah, I know that we've covered a lot here and hopefully done some interesting, fun things. But any specific questions that are coming up, or Liz, questions that I missed in our chat here?
Yeah, no, honestly, it's such an engaging group. I feel like everybody's like, can I have the chat, please? So yes, please use this time to steal all the goodies you have from here. But we do have a few questions. One question was, what would you say is more important to tackle first, a project's risk or its uncertainties? What should one keep in mind for each too as well?
Yeah, really great question. So yeah, I've got this grid, and I've got, I've got risk on one side, I've got uncertainty on the other side. Like, what should I tackle first? Yeah, really great question. I would say I would start by assessing certainty. So moving left here, and I'll go back to my screen here. I would say start on this axis and move kind of left to right here. So can you answer when you've got your question? Do we know what a tier 2 support software is? Start with known and unknown. Can I answer this with a yes or a no, or a number, or anything quantifiable? And if the answer is yeah, like we know what tier 2 is, if you're ever confused, it's right here in this definition. Great, that's known. If the answer is, well, we wrote one down last year and then I kind of forget where it went and it's somewhere, but I could probably dig it up. Okay, I'm gonna put it kind of right here. So as you can guess, the more concrete we have in terms of answering, the more I can move it over here. When the answer is I have no idea, or yeah, well, we'll get back to you on that, I move it over here. So start with my known to unknown grid, and then we want to think about risk, and risk is harder, right? There are all sorts of quantifiable ways you can do Monte Carlo simulations. I think expert consultations is really great for assessing risk, because you go to the experts and say, hey, you've been in this industry for a while. How risky is this question? But sometimes this just comes down to a gut feeling of how nervous does this make you? So when Scott, when you ask me that question, when you ask your leadership that question, they get really, really nervous. Okay, that's typically an indicator that there is high risk on the table, versus like they're like, yeah, I don't care. That's not a big deal. We deal with that all the time. Okay, cool, low risk. But yeah, really great question about what we do, how we address first.
Okay. Yeah, so we went through these great 3 steps, and honestly, I loved it so much how you kind of divide it, especially for me and my ADHD brain. So I guess what step is the easiest and what step's the hardest for, this audience has all this great information. How can they navigate it with one being easier, one being harder?
Yeah, great question. I would say asking questions is typically an easy step, in the sense that everyone's got questions, and if I especially when I drop a problem statement in your lap and I say, what questions does this generate? That's great, and lean into that easiness and excitement of, I just want all of the ones, I want to come up away with a list of 100. I would say the hardest step is then taking those questions and starting to grid those out, and getting agreement and getting alignment and getting people willing to sit in a room and hammer that out on a grid. Again, can be really hard. Having someone lead those conversations, especially if it's someone externally, can come in and be like, yeah, here, let's give everyone a chance to speak, and let's kind of provide an outside opinion, can be really, really helpful.
Beautiful. And I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I just want to make sure everybody, if they had this question, got it answered. But how do you get stakeholder buy-in? What are your best tips and tricks for that?
Yeah, really good question. I would say that I come back to doing these steps, and even if you can get a single sentence problem statement to just throw out to stakeholders, it's quick, it's easy for them to read. It also can spark potentially a lot of conversation, agreement or disagreement of, what are you talking, Scott? That's not what I assigned you to do at all. I just want you to bring me an e-learning. Okay, this is a great way for me to get confirmation or buy-in of, yes, this was important, or no, we're going in the wrong direction here. That can be a really powerful thing to do, and not something that we should just assume is easy to do. Yeah, good questions. And again, please do reach out to me. The QR code here takes you to a spot to book meetings. We're actually doing oh, and there's one other thing I wanted. Yeah, there's one other thing that I could certainly mention. We're doing a whole summer of learning thing, where if you book a meeting with us, we've got a great offer that we can give you to help connect you to others in the area, get you over to DevLearn as an all expenses paid trip. But the whole thing that we can talk about, if you're interested, and reach out to me later for.
Beautiful. And I see some people have already signed up. So that's so exciting. It was so lovely to have you, Scott. If there are any last words that you would want to say to the audience before I take it away.
No, just thanks for letting me nerd out about this. I'm going to go back through as much of the chat as I can, just because this was so much fun to see.
Yeah, no, it was honestly super exciting. And as the audience feels the same as I feel, this was amazing. And I appreciate you so much.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. And for everyone else who is still on the call here, I invite you to join us for some more up and coming training industry webinars this month. You can register for these programs and watch past webinars now at trainingindustry.com. All training industry webinars are pre-qualified for a credit hour by HRCI, SHRM, ISPI, and CPTM. If you're wondering what CPTM is, it's the Certified Professional and Training Management Program that assists you in developing core competencies that will empower you to manage the future training needs of your organization. You can participate in several of these programs throughout within the US or join us for a virtual practicum from anywhere in the world. Find more information at trainingindustry.com/training. And you can also join us online this September 25th and 26th for the Training Industry Strategy Summit. This year's sessions were handpicked to tackle the challenges of building an effective learning strategy. You can learn more at trainingindustry.com/strategy summit. Lastly, that evaluation survey should have popped open in another tab in your browser, and would appreciate hearing your feedback from today's session. I'm expecting all 10s based on the vibe of this chat. But thank you again to today's speaker, Scott. You were amazing, and our sponsor, ELB Learning. And lastly, and most importantly, thank you all for your time and attention today. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.
Take care, everyone.